Hello, and welcome to Day by Day True Crime Stories, the podcast where we explore a different crime or justice milestone from this day in history. I'm your host, Kona Gallagher, and today is August 7th. On the night of August 6th into the early hours of August 7th, 1985, a brutal crime left 5 family members of one family dead. The only surviving member, Jeremy Bamber, would be convicted of their murders. But now, 4 decades after the crime, the case remains clouded by controversy and doubt. Was justice served, or was it one of Britain's most haunting miscarriages of justice? Today, we're talking about the White House farm murders. Let's get started. In the quiet village of Tolus-on-Darcy, the night of August 6, 1985 began like any other. White House Farm, a Georgian home belonging to Neville and June Bamber, stood peacefully among the fields. That week, their adopted daughter, Sheila Caffel, was visiting along with their 6-year-old twin sons, Daniel and Nicholas. Their adopted son, Jeremy, who lived nearby, had also been around. It was a nice, quiet weekend, but by the early hours of August 7th, White House Farm was a scene of horror. Jeremy, then 24, called police around 3:30 a.m. saying that his father had phoned him in a panic, claiming that Sheila had, quote, gone berserk with a gun, end quote. And then the line went dead. Officers rushed to the farmhouse. Believing there was an active shooter inside and perhaps a hostage situation, they waited outside for nearly 4 hours. At 7:40 a.m., armed police finally entered. What they found was pure devastation. Neville was dead in the kitchen. Upstairs, Sheila lay lifeless beside her sons. Her mother, June, was also found nearby. In all, 25 shots had been fired, many at close range. According to the phone call, this seemed like a tragic murder-suicide. But crime scene details eventually began to raise questions. For instance, Neville appeared to have been shot both while he was upstairs and ultimately downstairs, which suggested a violent struggle. Sheila, the one who supposedly perpetrated this heinous murder of 4 of her family members before turning the gun on herself, had clean hands and no defensive wounds, nothing that indicated she had been in a struggle with her 6'4" father. A rifle rested near her neck and a Bible was open beside her. Police believed that Sheila, who had a history of schizophrenia, killed her family before turning the gun on herself. But she had 2 bullet wounds underneath her chin, one of which was in her throat. Then came the silencer. Days after the crime, about 10 days to be exact, a cousin found a sound moderator tucked in a cupboard. It hadn't been recovered by police during their initial sweep. It bore Sheila's blood and flecks of red paint matching a chip on the kitchen mantel. Experts later said that if the silencer had been attached when Sheila shot herself, she physically wouldn't have been able to reach the trigger. What began as a tragic murder-suicide now looked more like a setup. However, because that silencer wasn't found until much later, it meant that for weeks, police held to the murder-suicide theory. And as a result, the investigation was sloppy, with evidence mishandled, not collected, or even destroyed. Then, in September, Jeremy's girlfriend at the time, Julie Mugford, told investigators that Jeremy had planned the killings. He wanted to inherit the family estate. Evidence began piling up. Forensics backed up the idea that the silencer was used during the killings. But Sheila's reach wasn't long enough to use the rifle with the silencer attached. But it wasn't on the gun when her body was found. And there were also those red paint flecks, and experts said that it was likely that it struck the surface of the mantle during a struggle. Again, a struggle that there was no proof of on Sheila's body. But, what's even more troubling is that the silencer had been in the hands of family members for days before being handed to police. So it was just full of chain of custody concerns. Still, prosecutors pressed forward. Jeremy's phone story was also unraveling. He claimed that Neville called him saying that Sheila was attacking the family, but phone records showed the farmhouse line remained off the hook long after Jeremy said that call happened. Investigators now question whether that call was ever made. Meanwhile, doubts grew about Julie Mugford's motives. She received immunity for her cooperation, and some reports suggest that she profited from tabloid coverage. Her account, critics argued, changed significantly over time, even including details pulled directly from newspaper articles. By late September 1985, Jeremy Bamber was arrested. The case had transformed from a supposed murder-suicide to one of the most shocking allegations of familial betrayal in British criminal history. Jeremy Bamber went on trial in October 1986 at Chelmsford Crown Court, charged with 5 counts of murder. The courtroom was packed. Media from across the UK covered the case relentlessly. The prosecution argued that Jeremy cycled to the farmhouse that night, crept in through a window, and used his father's rifle, fitted with a silencer, to kill the family. They focused on the forensic evidence, the impossibility of Sheila using the gun with a silencer, and her clean hands lacking gunpowder residue, which was especially important because the rifle had been reloaded. They also argued Jeremy's motive was financial. With both parents and Sheila gone, he stood to inherit the entire estate. Witnesses testified that after the murders, Jeremy had spoken about selling the farm and traveling. But the defense countered that Sheila's mental illness could have led to the killings. She had previously made suicidal and homicidal statements and had been diagnosed with schizophrenia. Jeremy denied any involvement. He said that the rifle was left out for rabbit hunting and insisted the call from his father did happen. He accused investigators of mishandling key evidence, including the silencer, which, to be fair, was true. But after 9 hours of jury deliberation, Jeremy Bamber was found guilty by a 10-2 majority. The judge called the murders, quote, evil, almost beyond belief, end quote. He was sentenced to life in prison 5 times over. Later, that became a whole life order, ensuring that he would never be released. But the verdict didn't bring closure. Over the years, Jeremy has continued to claim his innocence. In 2001, the Criminal Cases Review Commission referred the case back to the Court of Appeal. New DNA testing couldn't conclusively tie Sheila to the blood on the silencer, and in fact, it suggested that it may have actually come from Neville or June. But the appeal failed. In 2002, the court upheld the conviction. Further attempts to reopen the case in 2004 and 2012 also stalled. The CCRC found no new evidence likely to overturn the verdict. Then came 2024. The New Yorker published an in-depth investigation suggesting that police mishandled key evidence, altered statements, and ignored a potential 999 emergency call made from inside the farmhouse at 6:09 a.m. The article raised new concerns about Julie Mugford's reliability and reignited debate over whether or not justice had truly been served. By mid-2025, the CCRC was reviewing new grounds for appeal. 4 were rejected, but 6 remain under review. Jeremy Bamber, now 63, has spent the last 40 years behind bars. He's one of the UK's longest-serving prisoners. Whether he's guilty or the victim of a miscarriage of justice remains hotly debated. Jeremy's supporters say that the evidence doesn't add up. The silencer, the phone call, the clean crime scene, they say it points to someone else. His critics argued that the verdict was clear, the trial was fair, and the motive was obvious. What no one disputes is this: 5 people died, including 2 small children. A family was destroyed, and a nation remains divided. Thank you for joining me on today's episode of Day by Day True Crime Stories. If you found this episode compelling, please subscribe, rate, and review the podcast. It'll help us grow. And be sure to join me again tomorrow as we explore another significant event in true crime history. Until then, stay safe and remember that behind every headline is a life worth remembering. Day by Day, True Crime Stories is a Little Monster production.
Hey, you can do it!